What it do, cuckolds? After the episode of Raw where Jey Uso dropped his title back to Braun Breaker, I keep wanting to say Bronson Reed, to Braun Breaker, the hater felt that this would be an opportune time to talk about the impact of Jey Uso's title reign. It sucked, motherfuckers! It was a horrible title reign. Just kidding. That was actually a rare instance of the haters screwing around. The reality is, the Jey Uso Intercontinental title reign, aside from the fact that he was crying about it, which should have never happened, was an excellent Intercontinental title reign. Jey Uso is someone who deserves a bullshit title reign just to cement him as someone that has had a bullshit title reign, just like Rikishi when he was Intercontinental champion for like a week and a half or whatever, right? But, or was he? I don't even know if he must have been, right? But more important than that, the Jey Uso Intercontinental title reign really sheds light on the importance of the Midcard title. The Midcard title, if used correctly, can be an excellent storytelling device when you give it to someone who is essentially undeserving and someone who feels like he's been robbed of the opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, like Jey Uso, right? And you have him beat someone excellent like Braun Breaker. You know, playing a hot potato with the title makes everyone look strong. Fundamentally, if you compare this title reign to that of Sami Zayn, it's not even close. But if you compare it to that of Gunther, it was a much better title reign than the one that Gunther had. Because holding the mid-card title for a year and a half or 2 years, whatever it was, is not a good look, right? Moving on from the Intercontinental title, after the Intercontinental title has done its job of elevating you to a legitimate mid-carder, is the correct course of action, right? Fundamentally, it makes no sense for Jey Uso to be the Intercontinental champion and be at War Games, right? But now, he is superior to Jimmy Uso, and now he brings another thing to the table. In addition, the Intercontinental title was used as a storytelling device, right? Solo Sikoa and Giga Fatu didn't just cost Jey Uso a random-ass match, because you can forgive that, you might not even care. They cost him the title that he held so dearly. This is, in my opinion, the primary way in which mid-card titles should be used, to accentuate screw jobs and to accentuate betrayals. In other words, the mid-card title, Intercontinental and the US title, and about 15 titles from AEW, their purpose is to put forward a storyline. They're never supposed to be the end game. Nobody should be happy being the Intercontinental champion, right? But if it's the first time you win it and you think to yourself, wow, this is a massive accomplishment, when someone takes away that accomplishment, this should kick the wrestler that got screwed into high gear. Like now, contrast that with Sami Zayn's Intercontinental title run, right? He was like a 3 or 4 time Intercontinental champion already. So him winning it again is not this like, oh, I can't believe Sami Zayn did it. Why not? He's done it 3 times prior. Same thing with Gunther. Even though this was the first time Gunther became Intercontinental champion, the entire time Gunther didn't feel and didn't present himself as someone who was like on the level of the Intercontinental Championship, right? This is evidenced by the many, many promos that Gunther cut, where basically he would say, I am the best Intercontinental champion, right? Because I am superior, essentially, to all the other ones. Meaning, you could construe this as Gunther saying, I am above this title, so of course no one's going to beat me for it, right? What they intended to do was to then have Sami Zayn beat him for it and be like, wow, how did Sami Zayn do this? But ultimately, as we've seen many times in the past, we saw the same thing again. And that is Sami Zayn won the Intercontinental title, and it was a completely meaningless title run. It was a completely meaningless match, and ultimately they had a rematch for the world title where Sami Zayn is not being kept near that at all, right? So with everybody saying the Intercontinental title sucks, we find ourselves back to discussing Jey Uso's Intercontinental title run. It was a short but effective title run. If, for example, let's just hypothesize that instead of Solo Sikoa, he was screwed out of the Intercontinental title by Gunther or by Cody Rhodes, you would believe that Jey Uso now has a viable interest in going after the champion, right? Not because Jey Uso has been elevated, I mean, that's obviously part of it, but because the world champion took away Jey Uso's mid-card title, right? In other words, the world champion felt threatened by the mid-card champion. So he screwed him out of it. And as a result, the mid-card champion now thinks, I need to get my revenge. I need to win this guy's title, not just so I can be champion, but primarily so I can do to him what he did to me. And as a result of this, everyone wins. The title wins because the former champion is now wrestling for the world title in an organic, story-driven way. And of course, the wrestler who was beaten for the Intercontinental title also wins because they're getting a push. Jey Uso is going to get a similar type of push in the sense that he will be in the War Games match guaranteed, right? We already knew that. So that was not a great use of the Intercontinental title, but it was still better than the non-use of Sami Zayn winning or the non-use of Gunther winning. Ask yourself this. If the Intercontinental title was not with Jey Uso today, right? If, let's say the Intercontinental champion was, I don't know, fucking Cruz del Toro. Let's say Cruz del Toro or Tozawa, even better. Let's say Akira Tozawa was the current Intercontinental champion. Let's just assume that was the case. And this match was just Jey Uso and Braun Breaker in essentially a grudge match. In a I'm better than you, no you're not match, right? If Solo Sikoa did everything that he did today along with the bloodline, the sting wouldn't feel as impactful, right? Now, keep that in one side of your dome piece. And let's go through Gunther's dominant run as Intercontinental champion. If he had this run without the Intercontinental title, his run would be more dominant, right? Because he would have been undefeated for like a year and a half, but he wouldn't be undefeated only wrestling the mid-card guys, right? You could throw in like a big-time guy and make his undefeated streak more excellent. Like, do you think Goldberg's undefeated streak would have been made better if he won the U.S. title on the first day and was just a U.S. champion for the whole time? No, it was excellent because Goldberg, who eventually won the world title as well, it was great because Goldberg was just undefeated. The undefeated element is what made it great. Now, with Gunther, if let's say he had this dominant run and Sami Zayn just said there was no title, again, Tozawa was the champion in this scenario, and Sami Zayn said, I can beat you, Gunther. I know you're undefeated and no one can beat you, but I think I can, right? This, and let's say he did, this would make Sami Zayn's victory against Gunther much more meaningful. He's the only guy that can beat him. But because Sami Zayn was so focused on the Intercontinental title that he said multiple times, and he had this weird backstory of how he feels inferior and doesn't think he's good enough for the Intercontinental title, the whole thing just fell flat, right? And basically what happened was the Intercontinental title was held hostage. In this particular context, Braun Breaker is now a two-time champion, Jey Uso is a one-time champion, and all of this happened in a matter of weeks, or maybe a month. Right? You see what I'm saying? A short title reign can be utilized into much greater effect than a long or prolonged Intercontinental title match or any other kind of title run, really, right? But the point is, it's not the. This is especially true for mid-card titles or the tag team titles. It's not the length of the title run that matters. It is the outcome of the title run, right? Gunther's outcome of the title run could have been achieved without the Intercontinental title. It's not that Gunther was the Intercontinental champion that made him become a World Heavyweight champion. Basically, he wasted 2 years of his life being Intercontinental champion, then he won the King of the Ring, right? Which he could have done without ever having the Intercontinental title, right? Sami Zayn is back to being a relegated jobber, which he could have achieved without ever winning the Intercontinental title, right? Now, I know you're thinking, what's the harm? They had their Intercontinental title, it makes the title prestigious. No, it doesn't. The title, as I've just shown in this video, could have been made more prestigious if separate to this, you had Tozawa versus Otis in a feud or something like that, right? Where separate to this thing that could have happened without the title, you do something akin to what happened today with Jey Uso, right? And you put the wrestler over using the title instead of just having a wrestler hold the title. The same is not true for the WWE Championship and arguably for the World Heavyweight title, even though the World Heavyweight title is basically the same thing as the Intercontinental title, right? The same is not true. For the World Heavyweight title, that is the ultimate prize. So when Roman Reigns has like a 3-year title reign, right? The idea is not that Roman Reigns, couldn't benefit from this, right? He is the world champion. He is the number one guy. He is the de facto WrestleMania main eventer until he loses the title. And even then, he likely will be the WrestleMania main eventer, right? So unless they get Cody Rhodes into their War Games match, Cody Rhodes is not main eventing Survivor Series. Forget about it. Gunther will be lucky to even be on the card at this point, right? He probably will be there against, Damian Priest, and it might be Cody versus, I don't even know who Cody would wrestle, right? But it doesn't even matter. But the point is, the main event of that pay-per-view is going to be the War Games match, as anyone who knows anything would tell you, right? But as we saw today, the Intercontinental title's value is in this hot potatoing, right? Where you just give someone the rub of now you're an Intercontinental Champion. Now, Jey Uso is the same as Gunther. They're both former Intercontinental Champions, right? At least in that regard, because Gunther is obviously also the current World Heavyweight Champion. But you understand what I'm saying, right? Nobody cares if the title reign was long, if it accomplished nothing. And Gunther's and Sammy's Intercontinental title reigns accomplished nothing. You know, I'll tell you this. I'll put it to you this way. Randy Orton, at one point, won the Intercontinental title. And this was back when the Intercontinental title was a hot potato title, right? And he held it for a long time. And this led to him getting a lot of TV matches, right? Which eventually led to him improving and eventually led to him beating Benoit for the World Heavyweight title. After him, every other champion was inferior, right? And they didn't feel like a real champion. Starting with, I believe, Shelton Benjamin beat him for it, right? Shelton Benjamin also had like an 8-month title reign, which was like one of the longest back then. But it meant nothing. Shelton Benjamin was not elevated by the title. He wasn't screwed out of it and then got into a storyline. As a matter of fact, Shelton Benjamin had no storylines except for the very, very underrated Mama Benjamin storyline, which I thought was great. But anyways, the point stands, right? The Intercontinental title, the US title, and the 19 titles that AEW has that are mid-card titles need to be used in this way. You screwed me, I screwed you. Not, I've had this prestigious and long run with the belt nobody wants, right? This would be like if you watch soccer, right? And you watched, I don't know, Italian soccer, Serie A, Forza Milan, right? If you watch AC Milan and they get relegated to Serie B, which is a second category, the second league of soccer, and then they end up winning Serie B, right? That's not a big accomplishment. They should win Serie A or at least be competitive in it, right? That's the same way that divisions work in other sports. In wrestling, like Damian Priest, for example, is higher up on the card conceptually than Kofi Kingston, right? Who might at any moment feud for the Intercontinental title. He's higher up on the card than Chad Gable, who has feuded for the Intercontinental title many times. He's higher up in the card than Sami Zayn because he's a former world champion, right? He is in a different category. So people like Damian Priest should have no interest in the Intercontinental title because he's Damian Priest. He's a former world champion, right? The mid-carders can go and say, I'm the best mid-carder, right? But the best mid-carder is inferior to the third or fourth world heavyweight contender. This is not as clear nowadays, but in the past, this was very self-evident. So for example, there was a stint where D'Lo Brown was the Intercontinental champion. I'm a big D'Lo Brown guy, so I like that, right? Then Jeff Jarrett became the Intercontinental champion. Then China, then Jericho. Then we had the hot potatoing of Jericho-Benoit angle. We had that situation, right? Regal got in there at some point, right? But at no point in time were any of the people that I mentioned, let's just focus on Jericho, Benoit, Angle, and Regal. At no point in time were any of these guys anywhere near the likes of Triple H, Stone Cold, Undertaker, The Rock, or even Kane, right? They weren't on the same level, right? The underpinnings were that while Jericho and Benoit wrestle for the mid-card title, Kane has no interest in the mid-card title because he's Kane. Kane is only interested, if anything at all, in the world title, right? The Rock, just because this week, or this month, let's say, or these 2 months, the feud was, I don't know, Triple H is the champion versus Kane for the world title. The Rock, who had nothing on his plate, he didn't just like sit around and think to himself, well, maybe I'll go wrestle, I don't know, like Matt Hardy for the European title. You know what I mean? He never even contemplated that because he's like, oh, I'm The Rock. I'm obviously better than Matt Hardy. The understanding of wrestling back then was that if, for example, The Rock wanted to be European champion, he would have no problem being European champion in a 3-minute squash match, right? As a matter of fact, The Undertaker at one point became the hardcore champion, right? They had nothing for him, and it was like him versus Raven or some shit like that, right? And you're like, oh, okay, there's absolutely zero chance that Raven wins this match, right? Taker's gonna just destroy him, which is exactly what happened, right? And then Taker went up to feud with Big Show for the hardcore title, just to put that title over a little bit, right? But the primary feud there was Taker versus Big Show. When Triple H was wrestling Mankind, this is probably the best example, when Triple H was wrestling Mankind and Mick Foley and Cactus Jack and all the other personalities except for Dude Love for the WWE title, The Rock was in a massive feud with the Big Show, right? He was in a massive multiple-month feud with the Big Show, right? Because it was presented, and this culminated at the Royal Rumble where The Rock cheated and beat the Big Show, winning the Royal Rumble, right? At no point in time did The Rock think to himself, I'm not going to feud with the Big Show. Let's see what China is up to so I can rock bottom her and become the Intercontinental champion again, right? That's not how it worked, and that's not how it should work right now. And as a matter of fact, almost every Intercontinental title change that happened during that time was the product of some storytelling device. For example, D'Lo Brown lost the European and the Intercontinental Championship to Jeff Jarrett when Mark Henry turned on him, right? Jeff Jarrett lost to Chyna after he developed his misogynistic character, and Chyna became the first woman and only woman to become Intercontinental Champion. This was used to tell a story, to say that the women can hang with the men, right? This cannot be done with a world title necessarily, but you can make it believable with the mid-card title. You can say that Chyna, who is clearly superior to all the other women in the roster, has a chance against the lower level men of this company, right? Nobody would ever suggest that Chyna has a chance against Kane, right? Or Big Show, or The Rock, or Stone Cold, or Triple H. Even though she may have had a match here and there with them, right? It was never presented as any kind of competitive logic, right? It was just, these guys are going to go over Chyna because Chyna's Chyna, And that's the way that the Intercontinental title, and to a lesser extent, the European title, were used. They were used to tell stories. And that's what we need to go back to. Using mid-card titles to tell stories, and using only the World Heavyweight title, if you must, and of course the WWE Championship, to uphold the hierarchy of who is the top dog, right? No way, shape, or form can someone like Trick Williams, or someone like Gunther when he was Intercontinental Champion, or Braun Breaker even, or Jey Uso, position themselves as and say I am the Intercontinental Champion, therefore I'm the number one guy. No, you're not. You're absolutely not. Cody Rhodes is presented as the number one guy. And as I said before, just because Roman Reigns is not the world champion, he's still above Jey Uso, obviously, right? It's going to be Team Roman Reigns, motherfucker. It's not going to be Team Roman Reigns and Uso. It's going to be the original bloodline, which is hyphenated by the fact that it's basically the original bloodline hyphen starring the real leader, Roman Reigns, versus Team Solo Sikoa, the new bloodline, right? That's how it's going to be presented. So with all that being said, this reality still holds true. Just because LA Knight is the US champion, he's not presented as being on the same level as Cody Rhodes. He's obviously better, but he's not presented that way. And that's all that matters about these things. Cuckolds.